Okay, good morning, everyone, and happy Friday. I can tell you with the weather this morning, this was one day that I have been very thankful to have to walk down a few steps to get to my home office, as opposed to driving in the storm. So hope that everybody's Friday is off to a great start. I do want to welcome you to the first of this 4-part crisis strategy series. Before we get started today, though, I'm going to go over a few CFHLA updates and reminders. So number one, as you should all be aware, CFHLA is continuing to use Zoom for many of our meetings. This includes weekly Monday general manager meetings, weekly Thursday happy hours, our council meetings, leads groups meetings, the breakfast club, coffee club, PAC PC, etc. So continue, if you are part of any of those groups, to look for those email reminders. Additionally, in May, we will hold our first virtual Allied Relations Council breakfast meeting. Number two, this past Wednesday, the Orange County Economic Recovery Task Force held its first meeting to discuss the reopening of Central Florida. This is being chaired by Georgia Gell of Visit Orlando and Tim Giuliani of the Orlando Economic Partnership. CFHLA members Jesse Martinez and Stephen Jameson have been appointed to serve on this task force. The group is now going to meet in 5 separate subgroups, and then the next full task force meeting is going to be on Tuesday, April the 28th from 2:30 to 4 p.m. CFHLA will send out on Monday information on how to view that meeting. If you have any interest in seeing what is occurring during the time, we'll also include any recaps of that meeting. Lastly, CFHLA, working with Gray Robinson, is in communication with Orange and Osceola County property appraisers and state leadership to try and secure a reduction in property taxes due to the coronavirus. More information will come as this progresses. Okay, now I would like to introduce the program. CFHLA new member and Barr has offered this 4-part crisis strategy webinar series complimentary to CFHLA members. So today we have part 1, crisis communications, assessing what's working and getting ahead of what's next. Next Friday, we will have part 2, media crisis strategies, increase awareness and intent with reduced budgets through strategic media opportunities. The following Friday, May the 8th, we will have part 3, creative messaging crisis strategies, content that connects during crisis, tips for how to connect with consumers through creative. And then our last part 4 will be on Friday, May the 15th, search and social crisis strategies, social opportunities and recommendations to effectively reach audiences and maximize budgets during a crisis. We will be sending out links in the back of the house to register for these every Friday, the Friday before, and then on Mondays you'll receive a full flyer with that registration link as well. All times, again, the 9:30 to 10:30 a.m. So we hope you will enjoy this morning, and then you will join us for the following. At the end of our presentation today, we will have time for questions and answers, so please utilize that chat box at the end to enter any questions that you may have, and we will go over them. Okay, now I would like to introduce today's presenters. We have Aaron Pagan, Senior Director, Public Relations, and Mike Lovecchio, Account Executive, Public Relations for Barr. So Aaron and Mike, I'll now turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Erin. So we're going to go ahead and get started today, and we'd love to tell you first just a little bit about Barr. So what we wanted to be able to share with you is that we are an agency that has been in this community for more than 6 decades. So we're super proud of that. We are the oldest, largest, and most comprehensive agency in Central Florida, and we work with really great brands, but especially in the areas of travel and hospitality, travel tourism, and restaurant, retail, and healthcare. And love our partnerships in this community. We're located downtown on Lake Eola, and really excited to be a CFHLA member and be able to connect with all of you today, even if it is just virtually. So with this in mind, I'd love to show you a little bit about how we are an integrated agency and how we're going to bring this 4-part series to life for you all. And so you'll see here that we cover everything from research and strategy to media and analytics to creative and production, and then of course PR and social influence, which is the area we're really going to focus on today. So moving on to today's topic specifically, I know you all probably saw this in the promotional materials, but I think it's worth revisiting, is that, you know, they say you don't know where you're going until you know where you've been. And today we're going to walk you through that top line self-assessment to just sit back and really think about and evaluate how your organization has managed internal and external communications during the past weeks in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Help you consider how to prepare your communications plans for the return to a new normal. The COVID-19 pandemic is a world-changing event. McKinsey & Company, a highly regarded global management consulting firm, recently published an article that included something really interesting I wanted to share. For millennials and members of Generation Z, and again, these are all born between 1980 and 2012, this crisis represents the biggest disruption they have faced. Their attitudes may be changed profoundly and in ways that are hard to predict. The tourism, travel, and hospitality sectors may see their businesses subject to long-term changes in business and individual travel preferences. So while we don't know yet what our next normal will look like, we have a tremendous amount of great work behind us in the past 6 weeks, and yet so much we still need to prepare for what's next. So let's take some time together this morning to walk through how to reflect on and assess what's been accomplished, and then consider how we use that information to plan for the communications for what's ahead. So moving on to the next slide, you're going to see here that this is really the comprehensive public relations services offering. If you don't have a background in PR communications, please don't be surprised by this. But I think a lot of people immediately, their heads go to media. It's just about dealing with the media. But quite honestly, public relations has so much more, so many additional benefits to bring to a company or an organization. And so this is what I casually refer to as the PR pie. But you'll see that it goes from issues, crisis, planning and management, all the way around the circle and up to exec comms. And so we're going to touch on each one of these key focus areas today so that all of you get the opportunity to hear about how you can utilize each of these key focus areas to support your businesses. So moving on, this is really where we want to get started is kind of that self-assessment, how you and your team or you and your leadership think about how you all handled internal and external communications during the past 6 short weeks. I'm sure it has just felt absolutely crazy, and it probably feels like it's been a year. But looking back over these past 6 weeks now and looking at what all was accomplished, what did you have the bandwidth to do or the expertise? What were you not able to do, truly for some of those same reasons? Looking at so many best practices and all these webinars we're all on, we're hearing a lot of people who were able to do certain things that we think about, wow, I wish we had done that. Well, now's the time to really incorporate those into the ideas for what's next. Because being able to look back on what worked, what didn't, what was a missed opportunity, but yet what can still be done is really important. And even more important is, do you have a feedback loop by which your customers, your guests, your team members, even your vendors are able to let you know how communicated they felt by you? Do they feel like it was timely? Do they feel like they had enough information? Do they feel like you sent it through the right delivery channel? So if you don't already have some sort of feedback loop in place, now's a great time to get it, because it can be very hard when you were part of the group to step back and objectively assess how you all did. So moving on, the first key focus area is issues, crisis planning, and management. And that is what we are in the middle, all of us, what we're in the middle of. And so the first step is assessing your current plans. Many organizations already had crisis plans in place, especially for fire, hurricane, and other instances. But highly likely no one had one for a pandemic. but so much has been learned in such a short amount of time. There really is this opportunity to take your plan, make some changes, make some additions, or if you had never really put a formal plan in place, now's the time to do so. Now more than ever. So the main component though of developing a plan is that it's actionable. How many times I've seen that 170-page crisis plan that's, in a binder up on the shelf, and when things get really stressful and you have to really immediately start taking actions like dominoes, it's not even a roadmap that you could just pull out and start using step by step with what's the message, what's the timing, who do we need to reach. It needs to feel like a step-by-step roadmap that you can immediately put into place. And then more importantly is that once you have this great plan is to practice it, because if it stays within a small group of leaders or managers and it's not fully cascaded through every level of team member, when it's time to actually enact it or execute or implement it, those folks are maybe seeing it for the first time, or maybe they're just seeing pieces of it for the first time. So taking the time to stop and practice through these plans is incredibly important. That way it also builds everyone's confidence that when it's time to go to work and get it done, they will feel like we have done this and we've got this. Again, providing an anonymous feedback loop for when you practice these plans is incredibly important, because again, the team members who have to bring it to life, or anybody who got to be part of the test of, how did it feel to be communicated to during that crisis, is going to be able to give you that feedback to make those plans better, stronger, faster. So it becomes a living, breathing document that every time you practice it, it gets better and better. And then lastly, get objective counsel from an outside agency to assess your plans. Sometimes we're just internally too close to the business or too close to the operations, and we can miss opportunities or not see gaps. So getting that objective outside perspective can be incredibly beneficial. And that can be from a public relations agency for the communication side, or it can be from a consultant on the logistics side and the operational site side. So moving on from crisis planning is executive communications. And this becomes incredibly important because it truly is about what leadership is sharing out, how quickly they're sharing it, and how inspired they are making their customers and their team members feel. So, I always like to share that how a message is delivered and its timing can be more important than the message itself. Whether you are the leader at the top, a site leader, a department leader, your messages to team members and customers or guests are absolutely critical. What you say and write, words matter. So here are some important areas to really consider. Is first the message itself. What's the overall tone? Does it feel cold? Does it feel warm? Does it feel inspiring, cautiously optimistic? What's the length? We have definitely seen some messages come out from leaders that just are incredibly long. And by the time you get to the third paragraph, you've almost lost somebody and they're closing out and they're not even really hearing all the great messages you have to share. Accuracy. There can feel like this pressure to perform, that you're trying to get information out so quickly that there can be some assumptions, and you don't want to have to go back and retract information. Consistency. If you're going to commit to a weekly message to team members or a twice a week to your customers, really stick with it so that there feels like people are expecting it and you can deliver on that expectation. Relevancy. We want to make sure, and this is a great segue to the next bullet, which is audience, is that the message you're delivering is to resonate with that particular audience. A message that's developed for team members versus customers versus vendors versus the general public are all going to be slightly different. They should still have the same information, so you're very consistent. It really helps you show transparency and trustworthiness, but they can just be gently refined to make sure they resonate with that particular audience. Delivery method. This is also crucial. You can have a great message, but if it doesn't get through, if it doesn't utilize the right delivery method, you can actually miss getting that message to the right people. If a leader puts out a video, but you have hourly workers who have no way to watch it, then they feel completely disconnected that they didn't get to see it. Versus if you're able to incorporate it into a video monitor in the back of house area and show it at the beginning of a stand-up or shift change meeting, then the video can be really impactful. Same with email. Lots of times people want to rely on emails to send out, but lots of times you've got different types of field office workers or other types of team members who don't check email. And so they don't get to see all those same messages that other people are receiving. So it's really important to look at video, email, social, your website, your intranet for your team members, and again, any of those stand-up or shift change meetings as being the right delivery method. Timing is also incredibly important. You want to be timely, so you don't want to wait so long that you feel like you have to have all the answers before you can put a message out. Lots of times your audiences just want to hear from you. They just want to hear that you're in this with them, and that you understand what's going on, and that you've got a great group of people working on next steps. Sometimes that's all they need to hear, is just acknowledge the situation, but they don't expect you to have all the answers right away. Consistency and frequency, again, incredibly important. You're committing to how often you're going to speak and what your message is going to be. And then lastly is training. If someone really does want to do video, which is a wonderful opportunity to really connect face to face, it's about presentation and preparation, personality, passion, authenticity, and empathy. And if somebody hasn't really been trained in those all those key areas, maybe video is not good for them right now. And this is the time to get them trained so that their videos come across with the same, it matches the inside. So training is incredibly important. And then moving on to the next focused area is internal communications. And this, of course, is that incredibly important piece where you're connecting with team members. Lots of times it can be thought that this is just HR's responsibility, but internal comms is really everyone's responsibility, from a CEO or president to a GM to a department head to even among your peers. Team members are a company's greatest asset and can be your greatest liability. They will share with their personal and professional spheres of influence what they read or hear from your organization. The biggest opportunity is to ensure they are made aware first, fully informed, and are engaged so they can spread the correct information or message. So what can we do to facilitate this? First, you want to, again, choose the most accurate delivery method. Make sure you get your message directly to them. You want to write and speak with patience, appreciation, empathy, and a sense of urgency. You want to be the leader and set the tone you want them to follow. If they feel how, upset you are, they feel how tense you are, they will perpetuate that. So this is the opportunity to inspire confidence and comfort, and to know that we're all in this together. And treat every internal message as if it were being heard by a customer. Anything that is either said or written internally can be shared externally. And so make sure whatever you're doing internally, you're really proud of if it were ever to be shared externally. And then utilize your intranet. If you are a large enough organization to have an intranet, lots of times an intranet becomes almost just this repository for old documents to reference, and people aren't really using it every day. Now's the time to totally get in there and utilize that intranet to become the sole source of information, and be able to make sure that you're getting to the point where the email may just be the teaser to drive them to the intranet for more information and all the details. And you start to change the culture by which the intranet is the first place people go in the morning to get all the information and updates they may need. And it can really help, again, aggregate all the messages and channels into one place, so people feel really confident that they know where to go to get their information. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Mike Lavecchio, who is going to address media relations. Mike?
Thank you, Erin. So media relations is tricky during normal times, but it's even more tricky now. With heightened sensitivities and so much information swirling, you really do have to be extra cautious. But at the same time, media still has a job to do, and it's a win-win if you can provide factual and helpful information that shares what your company is doing to care for the safety and well-being of your team members and your customers. So with that said, here's some basic do's and some basic don'ts when working with the media, really anytime, but especially during this time in the pandemic. And the first bullet here, be prepared. This is a huge one. Have a carefully crafted response that is succinct and articulates your company's top messages. Number two here, you see get outside agency support to provide media training, and that's now in preparation for the future if you haven't already, or get refresher trainings if it's been more than 6 months. Media training is a great way to anticipate reporter behavior, avoid common traps, and confidently focus on your messaging without getting tripped up. And remember, with this new normal, one-on-one interviews are going to be less frequent. Skype and Zoom interviews are going to be more common in the future, so make sure that you are comfortable in those situations. Remember that practice is confidence, so don't shy away from interview opportunity. Be well prepared and never rest on your laurels. And then lastly, return media inquiries within 24 hours. It may not seem like a big deal, but is somewhat of an unspoken rule among media and would be a great way to actually hurt a relationship with a media person or a media outlet by just simply ignoring a media inquiry. So moving on to some of the don'ts, don't rush to respond to media inquiries. At the same time, don't put yourself in a position where you're put on the spot. It's a great opportunity to leverage a holding statement, and buy yourself some time to figure things out so that you can respond to that media individual within the 24 hours. Another one of the don'ts, which should be coming up here on the next slide, is don't force a connection. If you don't have a direct connection to a story, don't try to make one up, especially right now. Media can see through that, consumers can see through that. Just as a quick example, if your company gets called to be a source or you get called to be a source for a story and it's not a great fit, avoid the temptation to perform, avoid the temptation to be opportunistic. You do not want to put yourself in a position where you give misinformation. So, just politely respond and politely decline. As a quick example, if your company gets called to be a source or you get called to be a source for a story that's not a great fit, do not utilize internal support. You do not want to put yourself in a position where you get or an internal communications representative. They're the experts. Don't try to take on something that puts your company or your reputation at risk. And if you don't have that internal communications through an outside agency, get help to develop well-crafted messages. You can really eradicate 20 years of hard work in one day by responding with the wrong message or simply not responding at all. So moving on to organic social. So organic social media, ensure that all your posts are well vetted ahead of time, working closely with your communications team to ensure consistent messaging. Use messaging that's already been developed and messaging that's already been approved from your communications department or your communications lead, so that all of those messages and all of those communications are consistent and that the timing and the release of those messages are aligned across all external platforms. Responses should always be taken offline. I'm not telling you something you don't already know. Social media can be a very negative place, and there may be times that your company or you need to respond to a negative post and connect a person with a concern for a resolution. If you find yourself in a position where you have to respond to one of those posts, we highly recommend you take it offline and provide them with either a phone number to air their concerns or an email address, or if either of those two options are not available, then through direct messaging through the social media platform. But you do you do not want to get yourself in a position where you are having a back and forth with an individual on a social media platform where the whole world can see. So moving on to event planning and management. Gatherings we already know this, will be smaller and include social distancing. So how do you make people feel connected when they're not physically together? It's a great opportunity for all events to be reimagined. Take this time to redesign traditional events to be virtual. Press conferences via website is a great example, grand openings via your website or Facebook Live. The world is already going digital. It's just happening faster now. And if you aren't in a position to provide more video content, you're going to be left behind. And then lastly, engagement, fellowship, and team building among team members will still be key. It will always be key. How do you connect with team members when you can't physically be together? So opportunities to do virtual team meetings or virtual coffee breaks or virtual happy hours as a way to still ensure that team member camaraderie. So with that, let's move on to corporate social opportunity and community relations, and I'll turn it back over to Erin.
Thanks, Mike. So many of you probably remember this as corporate social responsibility, or CSR, for many years, but it's really evolved, and really it should feel less like a responsibility and more like an opportunity. So we'd like to start using corporate social opportunity, or CSO, and community relations, which actually both are a little different. CSO being more the what do you donate, contribute, give back. Community relations being what are the relationships you have in your communities that are really critical with elected and appointed officials, community influencers, groups that are important to your organization. So I just like to give that I'd like to distinguish those two, that CSO and community relations, although they can work very much hand in hand, are two separate focus areas. But specifically for what we're going through now, I just want to give everyone a chance to really think about, if you haven't already or you've probably been struggling with, what can your organization or business do specifically to the unique product or service you already provide? Lots of times there's just an inherent something you offer that people need. And so you don't have to create something new or spend a lot of time and effort trying to come up with something different. You already have something that's really important. And so with that, think about the ways that you can give beyond financially. Lots of organizations now are dealing with financial crises of their own. And so some tend to think, well, if I can't write a check, I can't do anything. And really, there's so many other ways to give. During my time with the American Red Cross, we used to speak in terms of time, talent, and treasure. And if treasure is not the area where you can really give right now, think about time, think about talent. That volunteer hours are, again, so important and so impactful. And even talent, that you all have knowledge, you have information, you have skills, you have education, that there are organizations that would absolutely love to have you contribute those talents to them. So try to think beyond money. And then small businesses versus mid to large size companies. It's definitely not an apples to apples comparison. A small business may really need to look for other small businesses around them or like theirs within maybe your same industry or just within the Central Florida community, where you can join up and together you make a bigger impact, and you don't have to feel like you're going it alone and almost feel the sense of, well, if I can't make a big enough impact on my own, we just can't do anything. So look for opportunities to align with other businesses or organizations and together make an impact. Same on the flip side, the mid to large size companies. Many want to say yes to everything. They want to help in so many areas. They want to be generous, but it's actually counterproductive. If you do not already have a well-developed CSR or CSO plan or program in place, think about doing that now. If you're trying to support 100 different things, but with maybe $100 check, you never really feel like you're making that big of an impact. And quite honestly, it becomes really confusing to your team members and your customers for what you really stand behind. Versus if you were to really put it into perspective and say, what if, whatever the course of our existence, have we tended to really gravitate to, again, based on our business or based on the type of team members we employ? You know, would we look at very specific pillars of social causes that we could get behind? Maybe if you're a small business, it's only 2. Maybe it's food insecurity and it's veterans. If you're a larger organization, maybe you can go up to maybe 6, but even then, that starts to get really hard to manage. So now's the time to really think about how you can aggregate your efforts, because then it allows you to make a bigger impact in very key focused areas. So please consider that as you're looking at your corporate social opportunity programs. And then moving on, we really know that not all of you are parts of public companies, but some of you are. And I think lots of times it's missed how critical the communications component of support is to investor relations departments. And so I just wanted to end on this because we're looking at different types of messaging and factors that are really being shaped by what's going on with the pandemic. And so ESG, or environmental, social, and governance, has been a topic for probably maybe the last half dozen years. And for really large global companies, they've already been working on their ESG programs. But for others, it's been talked about. But if it's not something that immediately is impacting your valuation, it can be something that's put on the back burner. But knowing what we're going through as a global, around the world with the pandemic, ESG is going to really become important, and now's the time to really think through it. Think about, if you're already doing it, how you can strengthen these areas. If you're not, how do you get started to make sure they're authentic and they're measurable? And that resiliency is going to likely become a key factor in valuations. And so thinking about how a business can be resilient to different types of crises is going to be an important part of the messaging that we use to talk about these companies. And again, your communications partner can be a critical component to help really articulate that story. So here the key is just having that teamwork and locked up partnership with communications can really help investor relations to infuse these messages in one-on-one conversations with investors or analysts, on road shows, quarterly earnings scripts, and investor day events. And then moving on, this really is how we wanted to kind of wrap up today, is with a little piece of encouragement and inspiration. It's been a really heavy 6 weeks, but knowing that there are some really cool things that have come out of this, you know, as we proceed with cautious optimism and planning communications for what's next, let us offer just a few points to incite some inspiration. Many of us have heard that necessity is the mother of innovation, but you may not have heard that all great changes are preceded by chaos, actually from Deepak Chopra. So let's reset our thinking that now is the time to place our old comfortable ways aside and be open to ideas we truly thought before as not possible. So now we're going to move into our question and answer portion of today's session. And so as Erin shared earlier, you can use the chat function to submit questions. And we'd love the opportunity to engage back and forth with you today so we can answer anything you may be dealing with today, anything you expect to be handling next week as we all come back to a Monday. And I know one that I've already gotten is about how do you decide on your corporate social opportunity or CSR pillars? How do you kind of choose those? And then how do you say no, knowing that there are so many individuals and organizations that are really needing help right now? And so what I would offer with that is that I think most companies and organizations have had enough in many years in this community or in other communities where they've already seen that they've got just some very natural affinity with certain groups. Again, those especially, you know, who are providing housing, or those who provide food, or those who can, again, make sure that the overflow of your soft turnover versus your hard turnover, that you have a place that you can donate all your linens and towels, that you then have other places that you know need furniture when you do hard turnovers. It can be very clear in your business what inherently kind of is just a natural fit, and that over the years you've tended to gravitate to. And as you've gotten these ancillary requests kind of here and there for, you know, supporting a child's school or someone's baseball team or something like that, those are the ones that unfortunately will have to start to be offboarded, because saying yes to everything is just too difficult. So you have to be able to be very clear in what your program is and give multiple communication methods to share that out so your team members understand it, your consumers, your guests understand it. You can promote it on social and on your website. And so it becomes at a point where people and organizations who are naturally aligned with that will reach out to you, and then you have the opportunity to consider that support. And those that are not aligned with your pillars, for the most part, won't ask. They'll look for other organizations, businesses that do have an affinity for them. Their philanthropy teams are very good at researching companies and trying to find the organizations that really care. So right now we're going to keep opening it up for questions. And I'm also going to turn it over to Mike to see if there's anything else he'd like to elaborate on, especially around kind of the media relations, media training, and how you get your leaders to embark on some training or even some refresher training. Mike, are you there?
Yep. Yeah. Thank you, Erin. So media training is very important, and I believe the audio cut out when I was speaking to this earlier, so our apologies for that. But you know, media training, if you haven't been trained before, now is certainly the time to be trained. Again, to better understand, you know, media questions, you know, potential pitfalls, how to properly pivot. If you do get a question that you know, may otherwise, you know, throw you off, how to stay on message, and really how to be comfortable. Again, like I said earlier, you know, you may be comfortable with one-on-one, you know, human interaction type interviews, but those are kind of going away, and you're going to see more and more frequent Zoom interviews and Skype interviews, or even like IFB interviews on camera. And, you know, sometimes those can be tricky because you don't have that human interaction element. So again, you know, media training, if you don't have an outside agency to help you with that, you should certainly consider it, because, you know, again, the last thing that you want to do is hurt your reputation or your company's reputation by not being prepared and by saying something that, you know, you shouldn't have said.
Great. And another question we received is, how do you choose the right spokesperson for your organization if you do receive media inquiries? And I think, again, every organization is different, so there's no one blanket answer. There aren't the same, obviously, roles in every organization. But I would share that a best practice is to not put out your top leader. Don't put your president or CEO on the spot, because media will expect that individual to have all the answers. There is very little grace. I think when you have someone who's maybe a head of operations, someone who is, you know, maybe not so much marketing or sales, because I think there can be a tendency to think, oh, I'm just going to hear the, you know, everything is great from that person. But somebody who is handling the business, again, like an operations manager, general manager, that is someone who is reputable, that they know what is happening on a day-to-day basis, but doesn't necessarily know all the answers, and shouldn't necessarily have to know all the answers. And there's nothing wrong with saying, I need to get back to you. That's a great question. I'll get back to you. May I have your business card or your contact information, and I'll get back to you. So never feel that pressure to perform, that you put yourself in a position where you've made an assumption or said something that you can't take back. So just consider that, again, getting some counsel on how you should structure your media relations, both proactive and reactive, so that anybody who's put in that position of proactively going out to media and contacting them, pitching them, writing media documents, really knows what they're doing, and that from a reactive standpoint, you've got the support that you need. I would say, I'm sorry, one other question I got here was about any sort of kind of best practices or examples we've seen out of the many emails we've received from the businesses that we are, we are customers of. And I will say one that really has been a standout has been Delta. And if anybody flies Delta and has gotten the updates from Ed, I just thought how quickly they came out with the very first message. Again, the consistency of receiving his messages, that they weren't too long, they felt very relatable. And just overall, the message was inspiring without sounding fake, without sounding like they have all the answers or that they have a crystal ball. Overall, just felt really warm and encouraging. And I think that those are a really nice guide as we look at how other leaders can reach out to your customer base. Also, we've gotten another question about what's the purpose of a holding statement. And so again, if we've used any lingo or terminology on today's session that you don't understand, please don't hesitate to ask. Again, these are not necessarily terms you all use on a daily basis, so we're happy to answer those. And that a holding statement really is a very general sentence or two that allows you to get back to media. Can actually, you can have a holding statement to get back to a customer, where you want to be able to let them know you received the question, you really appreciate them reaching out, and not just trying to Google the answer and get something wrong, and that you will get back to them, and you can even ask what's their deadline. And if it's 3 o'clock and they're trying to make the 5 o'clock news, well, you can try your best, but if you don't have the true answer by 5 o'clock, don't make their deadline your deadline. And then you put yourself in a position where you share something that, wasn't well vetted. But it's really important to be able to have a statement that is approved, that can go back and just acknowledge the question, because again, you're just continuing to reinforce the rapport that you've already built over, again, decades with your customers or with media. And you want to be able to continue that even through this difficult time. And then we've received another question asking about what should we be doing right now as we're looking at opening back up. It could be in the next several weeks as the discussions are being had around phased openings. And what I would share is really the overarching theme of today's session, which is now's the time that you're in the in-between of a lot of that heavy lifting has already been done during the last 6 weeks, but now there could be a lot more once we go into the reopening stages. So that assessment and getting our ducks in a row for what the plan should look like that will be even better than what you had 2 months ago, now's the time to focus on that. And again, we know this is just the communications portion of that. That's not actually what the reopening plan looks like, but how will we tell customers, current customers, how will we tell potential guests who are in a CRM system, how will we tell team members, and how quickly will we talk to them, and how will we use communication to facilitate a smooth transition, even if it's a phased approach. So this really is, quite honestly, a wonderful time to be able to utilize, again, the assessment and the planning so that we can get ready for whatever that next normal looks like. So I think that that's all the questions we've received right now. If you think of anything else, please don't hesitate to reach out to CFHLA and submit those. And Barr is happy to answer any questions after you digest everything that you learned today. And don't forget that we have these other series coming up, the rest in the 4-part series. We really want to thank each of you for taking your time out of a really busy schedule to participate with us today. And we hope you found this content really helpful and insightful, and you're able to walk away with some actionable items that you can immediately apply to your business to add value. So again, don't forget to tune in to the other parts of this strategy webinar series, and CFHLA will be sending out the emails with links to register. And should you have any questions or wish to speak in more detail about specific challenges or support, I know a lot of you are dealing with things that are very unique to your business, please reach out, and our contact information is here. And we thank you all so much for being with us today, and have a great rest of the day and your weekend.
Thank you everyone for joining us. We apologize for any audio issues you may have had. As discussed, this will be sent out to you with a link you'll receive at the end so that you can view the full recording.